Okay, all set? Cap TV, good? All set, Nick? Good evening. This is the House Committee on Health and Human Services meeting on Wednesday, May 5th, 2021. It is 6 p.m. We are in the House Lounge. We also have members who are with us virtually. Clerk, are you ready to take the roll, please?
Yes. Chairman Casey.
Here.
Vice Chair McLaughlin. Second Vice Chairwoman Donovan. Here. Representative Ackerman. Representative Azzanaro.
Present.
Representative Bennett.
Here.
Representative Bia.
Here.
Representative Kassar. Here. Representative Fogarty. Representative Giraldo.
Present.
Representative Handy. Representative Morgan. Representative Potter.
Present.
Representative Roberts. Representative Speakman.
Present.
We have a quorum, Chairman.
Thank you, Clerk. Okay, this evening we have 4 bills for hearing. Can I have a motion to hold the bills that are on today's calendar for further study?
So moved.
Second.
So moved by Representative Potter, second by Representative Kassar. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Chairman Casey.
Yes.
First Vice Chair McLaughlin. Second Vice Chair Donovan. Representative Ackerman. Representative Azzanaro.
Yes.
Representative Bennett.
Yes.
Representative Bia.
Yes.
Representative Kassar.
Yes.
Representative Fogarty. Representative Giraldo.
Yes.
Representative Handy. Representative Morgan. Representative Potter.
Yes.
Representative Roberts.
Yes.
Representative Speakman.
Yes.
Okay. We have 9, Chairman, in favor.
Thank you, Clerk. Okay, we are going to take House Resolution number 6236 by Representative Casimiro. This is a House resolution directing the Rhode Island Department of Health to require licensed nursing facilities to report on the number and percent of residents and staff receiving COVID-19 vaccinations during the declared federal and state health emergency, and annually thereafter if COVID-19 outbreaks occur. Representative Casimiro is not here with us. Do we have verbal testimony on 6236? I'm sorry. Okay, if he's on the line, we'll take him. Hello, Mr. Flynn. How are you, sir?
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman.
Good morning. Well, good afternoon. This is Chairman Casey. You're before the Health and Human Services Committee regarding the House resolution. I'm not going to read it again. Directing Rhode Island Department of Health to require facilities to report on COVID vaccines. If you would go ahead with your testimony, sir.
Yes, Chairman Casey and members. Thank you very much. We want to thank, we're here in strong support of this resolution, and we want to thank Representative Casimiro for introducing it. So this is really a consumer protection request, plain and simple, directed to the Department of Health. And patients seeking nursing home care or their loved ones should be able to compare nursing homes on the number and percentages of staff and patients vaccinated. We understand that currently only the raw numbers and not the percentages for each facility are reported to the Department of Health. And we don't envision that calculating the percentage would impose any burden on the facility's administrators. But I think without having, just seeing the raw numbers without knowing the percentages really doesn't give a consumer or anyone else much of a basis to try to understand, and compare. And we acknowledge that, there is turnover and in staff as well as patients, and so that these percentages and the numbers will vary. And the resolution doesn't call for how frequently this reporting should be done, but we would very much like to see it at least twice a month, and we'd ask you to support this. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Are there any questions from the committee for Mr. Flynn? Okay, so you'd be in favor with an amendment regarding the timing of the reporting of this information. Is that correct?
Well, I think, I wouldn't call it an amendment. I would just expressing, I think if this resolution was passed, that would just be our request to Department of Health. But we would not ask for an amendment. We'd like to get this, get this done. And that would be a suggestion. I mean, we would, whatever timetable they would adopt, we would live with that, but we would like to see it twice a month.
Thank you. I will, are there any other questions from the committee at this point? Okay, I will, while you're on the phone, Mr. Flynn, I will read the people who have replied with written testimony, and I will speak on from the Governor's Commission on Disability with their legislation. So we have two groups in favor. This is Maureen Maigret, who is the chair of the Long-Term Care Coordinating Council. She writes a letter of support, as well as Bob Cooper from the Governor's Commission on Disabilities. And actually, Mr. Cooper's note states that the resolution should be amended to require timely weekly surveys and public posting on the Department of Health's website. So we will take that under advisement. Are there any questions from the committee at this time for our witness? Okay, hearing none, this will close the hearing. Thank you, Mr. Flynn.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. We would, if procedurally, we would be very happy. I mean, if the committee would choose to amend it to put in a specific time frame, we would be very pleased with that.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't want to appear. We didn't think that was a good idea.
Right, no problem at all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony.
You're welcome.
That will close the hearing on House Bill 6236 by Representative Casimiro. We will now move to, I believe, item 3 on the calendar, which will be House Bill 6283 by Representative Serpa. 6283 is an act relating to animals and animal husbandry regarding donations of medications for use by nonprofit state and local facilities. This would establish a process for the donation of unused medications for use by nonprofit state and local facilities by owners of animals. We have some call-in witnesses. Is Representative Serpa available, or she has a notation of support here? Who do we have on the line, Alan? Brad Shear? Okay, go right ahead, please. Hello, Mr. Shear.
Hello.
Hi, this is
Chairman Casey.
Yes, sir. This is Chairman Casey. You are before the House Health and Human Services Committee on House Bill 6283. If you would go ahead with your testimony.
Thank you. Well, Chairman Casey and members of the committee, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about House Bill 6283. I am the CEO of the Potter League for Animals. The Potter League has 3 facilities around the state. Our animal care facility in Middletown.
Hello, Brad. Brad, can I interrupt you
Yep.
for a moment? We're having trouble hearing you. I don't know if you are on a cell phone or if you're in a moving vehicle.
No?
If you would, if you wouldn't mind, could we call you right back to see if we get a better connection?
Yep. Yeah, that's fine. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Actually, I can hear you now if wherever you
Okay.
are.
I'll just stay right where I am. I won't move.
Sounds good. Go right ahead.
Okay. So we have our animal care facility in Middletown, which takes homeless animals and has a veterinarian care for them, as well as doing some community medicine especially in the Newport public housing complexes for folks who have pets there. We also have the state's only high-volume, high-quality spay and neuter clinic in Warwick, where in a normal year we spay or neuter about 7,000 animals. And then our Pets in Need clinic in Riverside, where we see about 3,500 animals a year, and all of the animals we're seeing at that clinic are owned by people who are receiving public assistance, so not the general public, only people who couldn't afford a regular veterinarian. So I'll keep my testimony short. I submitted written testimony, which you'll be able to read, but simple to say that there's a tremendous need in Rhode Island for subsidized veterinary care. There are thousands of people who can't afford to have their pets seen, and this year the Potter League will invest upwards of $1.5 million in providing veterinary care both to homeless animals and to privately owned animals to keep them in their homes. And we do that because we have a tremendously generous community in Rhode Island that loves animals, and they provide us with what we need to provide that care. But unfortunately, there's one group in the community that can't fully contribute, and that's veterinarians. They certainly give of their time and their talent, but there are veterinary clinics across the state that have
15 seconds, sir.
medications that they could donate to us that they're currently prohibited from, and it can make a real difference to both homeless animals and people who can't afford those medications to keep their pets healthy. So I hope you will support House Bill 6283. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Brad. Are there any questions from the committee? All right, thank you very much. We're going to move on to actually Representative Serpa. We should have had her first. My apologies to her. Representative Serpa, Chairwoman Serpa, how are you?
Yes, good, Chairman. How are you? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My apologies. We had you for some reason at the bottom of the list of phone calls, so we've already had Brad Shear from the Potter League for Animals testify.
Okay.
If you would, and you'd like to, please introduce your bill and explain the premise, and we'll move from there.
Okay, thank you, Chairman, and I apologize for anything that is redundant based on what you've already heard, but 6283 allows for the donation of unused veterinary medicine for use by animal nonprofits like the Potter League and state and locally owned facilities such as rescues and animal shelters, such as the ones we have in our town. And I'm introducing the bill on behalf of the Rhode Island Veterinary Medical Association, RIVMA, so I think it's safe to assume it has their approval. And this is being introduced because veterinarians have determined that many of their clients willingly return unused prescription veterinary medication after their own animals pass away or have to be euthanized. And one established Rhode Island vet, and if I told you his name in the facility, you'd all know it, he told me that he used to accept the medication, pack it up, and send it off to poorer, lower socioeconomic countries for use or redistribution by the vets there, because the clients typically can't afford veterinary medication. And unfortunately, they often resort to euthanizing their pets, sometimes prematurely, just because they have no alternative. So this vet is keenly aware, though, that these meds can be used right here by nonprofits and the rescues that I mentioned earlier. And my guess is that he's probably the one who brought the idea to the Rhode Island Veterinary Medical Association, and in his discussions only to learn that it was a shared, quote-unquote, good problem that they all have. So the legislation's in front of you, and it clearly spells out the conditions under which the meds can be distributed. That begins on page 2, line 5. It continues with the meds allowed as well as those not allowed. It provides guidelines for their reissuance, handling upon receipt by the vet, And finally, the provisions that exempts the vets or the reissuing agencies from civil or criminal liability for the redistribution of these medications. So I hope you like the concept. I hope you'll approve it for passage, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can if they haven't already been answered.
Thank you, Chairwoman Serpa. Are there any questions from the committee for Chairwoman Serpa regarding this bill? Okay, so we're going to move on to our further testimony. Thank you very much for your introduction. And
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
I apologize for not having you first.
No problem. No
Thank you.
problem.
Hello, Mr. Block.
Aye.
Hi, this is
Thank
Chairman
you.
Casey. You are before the Health and Human Services Committee regarding House Bill 6283. You can go right ahead with your testimony, please.
Thank you to you and the members of the House Health and Human Services Committee. Yes, Rep. Serpa ratted me out. I used to collect these medications, and because it's currently illegal in Rhode Island to repurpose them, even to give them away for free, I just couldn't throw out perfectly good medications when I know there were places in the world that could utilize them. So I'm not sure if it was skirting the law or not, but I would box them up and mail them to rescue organizations in the Caribbean who would utilize them. But that was the genesis for me thinking there might be an opportunity to solve a couple different problems here, one of which is the fact that in a hospital like mine, I probably get thousands of dollars of medications turned over to my hospital annually that are from people whose pets no longer need the medicine, or their pets have sadly passed away, or their pet has an untoward reaction. And these medicines are perfectly good. And when you realize, as I think Brad Shear said, how much there is a need for assistance, financial and other, in a lot of the shelters and nonprofit organizations that provide veterinary care, marrying these two problems seemed like a no-brainer to me. This would have been a much better presentation if it was visual, because I have a box of medications in front of me that's probably $3,000 of medications. Here, I'll shake them so you can listen to the pills moving around in the bottle. But some of these medications are antibiotics and pain relievers and anti-seizure medicines that can cost clients hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a year. And it just seems silly to do what I have to do currently, which is either ship them out of the country or, in many cases, just throw them in the trash as medical waste, even though they're perfectly effective. So this bill would allow also these medications to be used if they are recently expired and still maintain their potency and efficacy. That's particularly true for medications in blister packs, medications that have never been opened. Obviously, it would be up to the prescribing veterinarian whether or not they were comfortable using the medicines in that regard. But given that many of the pets who require these medications can't afford any of these medications, it seems to me like the very, very, very small likelihood of a decrease in potency is worth the risk, given the potential benefits that so many of these medications can provide. Just like we occasionally drink milk that's slightly past its expiration date, as long as it doesn't smell bad or taste bad, the same is true for these medications. They are perfectly functional, often well past their printed expiration date. I won't repeat things that Dr. Serpa and Brad Shear said already, but I would be happy to answer any questions anyone on the committee has regarding the text of the bill.
Thank you, Gary. Are there any
Sure.
questions? Are there any questions from the committee for our witness? Okay, thank you, Gary. We're going to move on to the next witness. Good afternoon, Mr. Lopes. This is Chairman Casey of the Health and Human Services Committee. I have you before us on House Bill 6283. If you would care to go ahead with your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Casey, members of the Honorable HHS Committee. Leonard Lopes on behalf of the Rhode Island Veterinary Medical Association. I want to first and foremost thank Chairwoman Serpa for her advocacy in this issue. As we all know, Chairman Serpa is such a fabulous advocate, and when she is passionate about an issue, it comes through loud and clear. And I want to just thank her for her testimony today. We have submitted a letter of support, obviously, on this bill, which should be in the committee file. Just by way of background, Mr. Chairman, the Rhode Island Veterinary Medical Association is a community of more than 200 veterinarians whose dedication to animal welfare reaches far beyond their clinical walls. We offer public health services to Rhode Island residents, including rabies clinics, as well as spay and neuter assistance programs. And I want to also say on a personal note, I heard the testimony from Mr. Shear of the Potter League. I actually got my cat from that shelter, and it's such a fabulous shelter, and in any way we can assist that shelter and shelters like that do the great work they do to allow animals and their owners to continue their relationships. It's just respectfully sound and great public policy. So I also want to thank in advance the experts who are going to be testifying further on this bill, Drs. Block and Wetzma, who can provide any technical assistance or questions the committee may have. But this is one of those occasions, Mr. Chairman, respectfully, and I've been doing this for quite some time, where the bill is just one of those issues that goes far beyond just policy. It's saving, respectfully, men's and women's best friends. So I just want to say I want to thank the committee and hope that you would support the bill. Thank Chairwoman Serpa for her leadership. If you have any questions, I look forward to answering them.
Thank you, Mr. Lopes. It's always good to hear your voice. Are there any questions from the committee for Mr. Lopes? Okay. Thank you, Lenny. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So with no further testimony, I will just go over the listing of the written testimony. We have letters in support from Henry Wright, who is the president of the Rhode Island Farm Bureau. There is a letter of support from the Rhode Island Veterinary Medical Association, and also a letter of support for the bill from Cara Montalbano from the Potter League for Animals. And with that, I will close the hearing on House Bill 6283. And next, we are going to take up item number 2 by Representative Falella. This is House Bill 6282, an act relating to health and safety regarding the Emergency Medical Transportation Services and the Ambulance Service Coordinating Board. Representative Falella, whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having me. Well, thank you for the committee for having me also. 6282 gives the Ambulance Service Coordinating Board approval powers over regulations, protocols, standards, licensing fees, and other administrative actions proposed by the Director of Health. Basically, this bill codifies what has been in the existing law for the past 40 years. And if you don't mind, I'd like to defer my or any of your questions to the professionals in this bill, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Falella. All right, so we will go right to the testimony. Okay. While you're doing that, I will... Adam Reese, okay. Hello, Adam. This is Chairman Casey from the Health and Human Services Committee. You are before us on House Bill 6283 regarding the Ambulance Service Coordination Board. If you would please go ahead with your testimony. Hello, Adam? Hello, Adam, this is Chairman Casey. Are you with us?
This is Brad Collins, actually.
Okay, Brad. Okay, we have Dr. Brad Collins from the Rhode Island Medical Society. You, sir, are here before us with House Bill 6282. If you would, please go ahead with your testimony.
Sure. As a member of the Rhode Island Medical Society and as a physician in hospital medicine, I stand in opposition to the bill. This isn't just an emergency medicine bill affecting one type of doctor, but all of us. And I think that the director's letter said it best, that there are multiple problems with it, and I just wanted to voice my opposition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Are there any questions for our witness from the committee? Okay, we're going to move right along.
All right, thanks so much. Have a good one.
Thank you. Mayor Policina, this is Chairman Casey. Are you with us?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman. How are you?
I'm doing fine, sir. You are before us on House Bill 6282. This is the Emergency Medical Transportation Services Ambulance Service Coordinating Board bill. If you would please go ahead with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Casey, Chairman, sir, and thank you, members of the committee. I want to thank Rep. Falala for obviously putting this bill in for debate. Just let me say quickly that I have a small amount of experience, I guess, on EMS fire rescue. I spent 21 and a half years as a firefighter. Started when I was 20. 18 years of those on rescue. I was EMS coordinator for the Johnston Fire Department. Going to be a registered nurse. Have a master's in education. Hold an EMT cardiac license. I'm a state instructor coordinator, a mental health first aid instructor, and of course I've been teaching EMT since 1986. And I was a former member of the ambulance board as well as a former state senator. Now I'm not giving you my resume for a job. I just want you to know that I have a
You're hired.
experience. Yeah, no, thank you. Let me say that the current makeup of the ambulance board has members that are hardworking, dedicated, and give their heart and soul to this board. And they're from all walks of life, and it's a diverse group. This proposed legislation does not, I repeat, does not rescind, stop, or remove any power from the director of the Department of Health. Nor would we want that to happen, Mr. Chairman. I can tell you that would never happen. However, this bill would allow any changes to be vetted thoroughly through this board subcommittee, then the full, obviously, board for an open debate and discussion. And it would prevent a few individuals from usurping the board's hearing and discussions of the merits of potential changes. The director still has the last say. I repeat, the director still has the last say. As a member of the board who represents the League of Cities and Towns, I have a great concern about a state agency hijacking a city or town's authority when it comes to fiscal spending with their unfunded mandates. In the past, the Department of Health EMS office has tried to push huge financial burdens on the cities and towns. In some instances, perhaps they would want to tell cities how to mandate paid medical directors, change the lettering on rescues from rescue to ambulance, which costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, just on their whim. So Brian Daniels will have something, I'm sure, to tell you how a couple of years back, they wanted us to come up with all the cities and towns about $900,000 on the low end, obviously, without a fiscal note and without, obviously, a vetted hearing process. Let me say that as a former state senator, obviously in the leadership, any legislation that I filed with my colleagues, we always had a fiscal note. My major concern, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, was if this was to continue, by the way, it was tried a few months back, it'll wreak havoc on our budgets, as well as usurp the powers of mayors, town administrators, town managers, and town councils. If the DOT/EMS office, strike that, if the DOH EMS office wants changes that cost money, then let them pay for it, just like we do with other agencies. As I stated, this was an attempt months ago. It was never, I repeat, never brought to the chairman of the board nor his board members for proper vetting. Again, this will not take the powers away from the Department of Health director or put people's lives in danger, as some of the doctors have indicated, which quite frankly is insulting and disgusting, with their mass hysteria letters and those that are on Facebook saying crazy stuff. You should probably ask some of those people on Facebook, have they gotten part-time jobs because of the legislation, or I should say because of the policy changes that they've made or pushed through without the board's permission. We cannot allow a state agency to set policy, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, that the taxpayers and put them in financial jeopardy. We need predictability, not to have to be concerned with some agenda-driven individuals that will push their beliefs onto all 39 cities and towns without proper vetting and having a fiscal note. Oh, by the way, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this legislation, as Rep. Colella said, would kind of codify the board's past practice since the 70s, which I was on the board many, many years ago, before I was reappointed as a member of the Senate President's appointment. Once again, the director would still, I'll say it again, Mr. Chairman and members of the Senate, and those doctors that are listening would still have the final say, absolutely. I and my fellow colleague board members would not want it any other way. Those 25 dedicated women and men on the board would never, I repeat, never put the public in danger when it comes to pre-hospital care. City and town leaders must have a voice in what changes are proposed. Those cities leaders are elected. Those individuals who work at the EMS office who are trying to usurp the powers of the board and have a less transparency process are not elected. I don't believe many of the people in opposition really understand what the legislation does. I believe that if they were given misinformation on this legislation by those who have been profiting by the past policies that have been put forth by a few individuals who put policies forward without an open, transparent process and a fiscal note. Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate you allowing me to speak. I'd be honored to answer any questions from you or your members, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Policina. Are there any questions from the committee for our witness? Okay. We have one from Representative Giraldo, please.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the floor. Mayor, I understand you're one of the 28 members on the board currently. Am I correct?
Mayor Policina, are you still with us? Could you please? All right, we're just going to stand by for a moment. Hello, Mayor. Welcome back, Mayor. We have a question from the committee. I'm sorry we got a little technical difficulty there. I believe we cut you off. Go ahead, Representative Giraldo, with your question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again, Mayor. Mayor, if I understand correctly, you are one of the 25 or so members that serve on the Ambulance Service Coordinating Board?
Yes, sir. There are 25 members, sir.
Thank you. Those that know me know that I'm a big proponent and big advocate for making sure that our boards, commissions, and decision-making entities of any kind represent and reflect the communities that they serve. And so just have a quick question. Can you tell me how many people of color currently serve on the Ambulance Service Coordinating Board?
Representative, that's an excellent question. Unfortunately, none. And that should be changed. We should have people of color as well as people from the Latino community. So you're absolutely right. I will say this, if I may, sir, that there are people from the public there, and I know that in February of 2022, there'll be some positions opening up, and I would be honored to work with you to get some people of color, either in the medical profession or as a civilian on that board. But you are 1,000% right, sir. There are no people at this point in time that I recall, people of color or people from the Latino community. I could be wrong, but obviously from the meetings I've been at, no.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that transparency and that honesty, and I'd be happy to work with you on that. Thank you.
I look forward to it, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Giraldo. Are there any other questions from the committee for Mayor Policina? Representative Potter, go right ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Hi, Mayor Policina. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you, sir? It's an honor to speak with you this evening. Thank you.
I'm well, thank you, and same sentiment. Just a quick question for you. I guess I'll start by saying that I can maybe go out on a limb and speak for many of the committee members here, where I was very shocked with the amount of negative feedback that this bill received. I've been quite overwhelmed and bombarded with emails in opposition to it. But one thing that you said in your testimony was that this would not take the final say away from the director of the Department of Health. I'm looking at a number of provisions in the bill that say subject to the approval of the board. So considering that you, as you mentioned, are a former legislator yourself, I'm not an attorney. How do you come to understand that this would not take that regulatory oversight power away from the Department of Health?
Sure, very good question, sir. Well, I think by statutory law, I think she has that power. And quite frankly, I have no problem if the committee would see fit to put that in there, that the director, he or she, has the final say. You know, we're a board, but everything should be vetted, sir, because for them to just, for a certain few individuals to just push things forward because they have their own agenda and bypass the 25 members of the board is quite frankly insulting. You might as well abolish the board if that's the case. And I know that the chairman of the board, who does a fabulous job, is going to speak on a couple of issues where, quite frankly, he was blindsided by a few members from EMS, and that stands for Emergency Medical Services. So I believe, and I would have no problem codifying that, but I believe by statute she has the authority. Currently, obviously, she meaning our director, who I have a huge amount of respect for her. She's fantastic. She's been great through the COVID, as an aside. But I'd have no problem if the committee members said, listen, they want to lock it in, then just to be sure, then put it in the legislation that she has the final say. She is our medical director. She is our leader. But it's very frustrating, sir, and members of the committee, when these certain individuals, and let me tell you something, there's a couple of members on the board that do this because they have a financial gain by doing some of the things that they've done, is they just kind of push things forward and say, this is what we're going to do. They make changes. They made a change, if I may, I don't mean to hog the floor, but they made changes where they tried to prevent EMT cardiac technicians from giving immunization shots. And it took the governor to obviously do a memo saying, no, that's not the way it's going to be. So we have EMT cardiacs, or advanced EMTs, which are predominantly most of our firefighters out there, the men and women out there, who in some cases doing 15, 20 positive COVID cases a day. We're giving the injections. So they had it where they just wanted paramedics to give the injections. And that came from the EMS office, and it was covertly put in there, and it kind of got out there covertly till we found out. And then the change was made by the governor because, quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, through the chairman and men and women of the committee, we would never have the amount of people vaccinated as we do now if it wasn't for the EMT cardiac firefighters that are out there every day giving shots. But getting back to your question, sir, I'd have no problem if you wanted to put in the legislation, you know, on top of it, saying, hey, because she should have the ultimate say. And I say she because Director Scott, who I adore her, she should have the ultimate say. But please run it by the board. Let the board have an opinion. And they're not doing that. It's insulting to my colleagues on the board. And quite frankly, I think if you polled the 25 board members, you'd probably get at least 20 to say that, yeah, it's true. We should have a say. Because what good is having a board if the members of the EMS office, the Department of Health / EMS office, are just going to put things through and ram it down our throats? And I, as a member of the board for the League of Cities and Towns, who was obviously watching what we're supposed to do, no fiscal note. I mean, I know that the men and women of the House and Senate always look at a fiscal note before you create legislation. These people are creating things that have no powers. I mean, if it came from the General Assembly, I think it would be fabulous, but it's coming from individuals who are not elected. And then the other thing, too, ladies and gentlemen, is the separation of powers issue. I think that they're really trampling the separation of powers issue with members from the EMS office putting stuff in and kind of saying this is the way it's going to go without properly vetting. I know it's a little long, and I apologize, but I get very frustrated. I've been doing this since I was 20, and I'm 66, so I've been doing this a long time. And I'm sure that some members of the EMS office are saying Hail Marys that I get struck by a bus, but that's not going to happen for a while.
Thank you, Mayor Polisena. Are there any further questions for our witness?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Speakman, go right ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, Mayor. June Speakman from District 68, Bristol Warren.
How are you, Professor?
I'm fine, thank you, sir. You speaking very quickly at the beginning of your testimony, and I missed the part where you said that there were unfunded mandates and without a fiscal note. What particular decision or program was that you were talking about? Please.
Sure. Sure. So at one time, if I may, through the chair, at one time, the EMS board thought that they decided they wanted to rename all of the, because if I consider a fire department first responding rescue a rescue, well, they wanted to change it to ambulances, have all of the trucks related to ambulances, and that's gold leaf lettering, very expensive. That's just one issue. They've also made some other changes, and I'd rather have Brian Daniels speak to you because they wanted to make some changes where we had to hire a medical director. Now, my medical director does not charge my community. He does it, obviously, as a community service. But they wanted us to hire medical directors. And if you see what's going on, Professor, strike that, Representative, you'll see that a couple of these physicians have done very well by getting these part-time jobs here and there. They pick up these part-time jobs because they had it where you'd have a medical director who's a doctor, but of course they changed it to a certified emergency room physician. And guess what? Some of them have to, some of the ones who wanted to change happen to be certified emergency room physicians. So there's been some stuff that they tried to put through just a couple of months back. They tried to put something through, which would have cost money, and it has to do with training also. So by shortening the license span from 3 years to 2 years, I was looking at an extra $70,000, $80,000. Now you may say, well, that's not a lot of money for a community, but I don't have to tell the men and women of the House that things are going to get very tough pretty soon financially, and we're going to have to bunker down. But we'll get through this. We're strong. Rhode Island's strong. We'll get through this. So I'm sure there's going to be plenty of other instances, and I don't want to steal the show, Representative, from other members, but I know that our Executive Director, Brian Daniels, is on. He's going to explain to you about something that's some harebrained idea they come up with that would have cost minimum of $900,000, and I believe we were able to stop that because someone went to the governor at the time, Governor Raimondo, and things were put on ice for now. So I wish I had more time to explain exactly what's going on, what these people are doing. It's frightening, and I think these doctors that are listening should really get the facts. You know, I spoke to 2 doctors yesterday, and when I explained what was going on, they really kind of like, wow, we didn't realize that. You know, like my grandmother used to say, the truth isn't fun. But I got to tell you, these people are wreaking havoc, and it's an insult to the men and women on that board that sit at meetings, you know, quarterly, and all of a sudden, oh, by the way, this is going to happen. So that's why we need to get things, handle on things, and I'm concerned about the fiscal impact. Put a fiscal note.
Thank you.
You want to do something, pay for it.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Mayor. We have one more follow-up from Rep. Giraldo.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Mayor, just another question. Something you said caught my attention. Out of the 25 members, is there 100% consensus behind these changes or behind this legislation to make these changes?
That's a very good question. I would say if you polled, there's 25 members, excluding the 5 or 6 members that I'd say that are in cahoots with this whole process that they've been doing, I'd say you get the majority of the members that agree that, hey, we sit on this board. We want some respect. We want to be able to obviously vet it. Usually what will happen is if they want to make a change, and by the way, I was on the board in the 70s and 80s. So how it worked was, if they wanted to make a change, it was submitted to the board chairman would submit it to the subcommittees. We'd obviously have a process, an open, transparent process, bring it to the full board for a vote. And I don't remember ever back then us going against what the director of health wanted. And I've been through a few directives, since I've been involved in EMS. So that's basically, I would say yes, the majority. And when the chairman of the board comes on, we're very lucky to have this young man. He does a great job. I think he'll tell you the same thing. I think the general consensus is that most people feel insulted that we're sitting on the board, and all of a sudden these people from EMS, come forward and say, this is what we're going to do because we feel we have the right to do it. And quite frankly, I don't think Director Scott is being given the proper information, because I know Director Scott, and I know she wouldn't allow this. And as I said, I'm very taken back by the physicians that have come out and not even understand what this legislation is, and that this wreaking hysteria on everybody, that everyone's going to die if this goes through. That's not the case. The director has the final say. And as I said, the professional men and women on that board, there are nurses, there are obviously chiefs, fire chiefs, there are active members of the union, there are civilians. We would never allow that to happen. But we just need a vetting process, and as I said, these certain few individuals, they love spending the taxpayers' money, and they don't care what it costs. There has to be a vetting process, and there has to be some predictability and reliability for the elected officials that prepare their budgets.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any further questions? Okay, thank you, Mayor Policina. We appreciate your testimony. We're going to move on. We have Brian Daniels coming next. Thank you, sir. Hello, Brian?
Yes.
Yes, Brian, this is Chairman Casey from the House Health and Human Services Committee. You're before us on House Bill 6282. If you would please go ahead with your testimony.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chairman Casey and members of the committee. My name is Brian Daniels. I'm the Executive Director of the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns, and I'm happy to testify in support of 6282. Mayor Policina really outlined the concerns that we have with the status quo right now and why we think this legislation is necessary. I did want to provide some of that background that he referred to about why the league has been so engaged in this. We appreciate Representative Filella introducing this bill. Representative Filella also introduced a bill 2 years ago, 6169, that the House passed to add a municipal representative to the Ambulance Services Board. There had not been a municipal representative on that prior to that legislation, so we really appreciate the fact that the House passed that. And so one of the reasons for that legislation is the case that Mayor Policina had raised. In 2018, the Department of Health had proposed a number of EMS changes through regulation that would have had substantial impact on cities and towns. So to Representative Speakman's question about some of the detail, it would have set the medical services director would be that the cities and towns or the ambulance services needed to hire. It would have also created new administrative staff positions. I think there were 3 positions that were created that were mandated. It also would have given the EMS medical director greater budgetary and staffing authority over EMS personnel. Now, for those of you who have been in municipal government, much of that is handled by collective bargaining agreements. It's handled by the EMS chief or the fire chief or the public safety director. So it would have given the EMS director, who is, as Mayor Policina mentioned, is in many cases a part-time person, would have given them substantial authority over municipal personnel. So we had concerns about that. There were also changes to the ambulance standards, as Mayor Policina suggested. Some of it was marking and lettering, but some of it was also adopting an ambulance standard under NFPA that would have made it difficult for cities and towns to purchase used vehicles, and that's something that a lot of cities and towns do. They purchase used vehicles, they make modifications and improvements up to the current standards, and then they save some taxpayers' money. But the ambulance is fully certified. So when these came out, we had asked the Department of Health if they had done a cost-benefit analysis, and which they're required to do under state law. They had not done that. They had not even done a fiscal note, as Mayor Policina had suggested. So the Division of Municipal Finance worked with the cities and towns, and they found that the cost would be at least $900,000 a year for the cities and towns. That is just for the cities and towns. That's not the private ambulance providers. And so they didn't even know what those costs were, and they were getting ready to pass them. We did point out that under the state's unfunded mandate law, they cannot implement a regulation that has an unfunded mandate on cities and towns until the next fiscal year. And they ultimately decided, the Department of Health decided to withdraw the unfunded mandate components of those. So that's the background and one of the reasons why we're so concerned about what happened earlier this year when the Department of Health did not go to the board for regulations, because as we saw in that example, some of these changes have operational and fiscal impacts on cities and towns. So the intent of the legislation is to make sure that the board, which has a number of different stakeholders, including municipal representatives and doctors, EMS technicians, that everybody has a say on those. So that's the reason for the legislation and the reason we support it. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony, Brian. Are there questions for Mr. Daniels? Okay, thank you, Brian. We're going to move on to our next witness. Hello, Dr. Warren. This is Chairman Casey from the Health and Human Services Committee. How are you this evening?
I'm good, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to speak to you again.
Good, sir. Nice to hear your voice. You're here before us on House Bill 6282. If you would please go ahead with your testimony.
Thank you, members of the House Health and Human Services Committee, and Mr. Chairman. It's good to talk to you again. It's been a while. My name is Otis Warren. I'm an ER doctor. I work primarily at the Miriam Hospital. I'm also the president of the Rhode Island chapter of the American College of Emergency Physicians. We represent greater than 200 emergency physicians that live and work in Rhode Island. Just as a disclaimer, I do not serve on the Ambulance Service Coordinating Advisory Board, nor do I provide medical direction of an EMS agency. However, as an ER doc, I work with the men and women of Rhode Island's EMS agencies every day. Whether it's a crew from the fire departments of Woonsocket, Central Falls, Cumberland, Pawtucket, or Providence, or an EMS crew from a private ambulance company, I consider these men and women my colleagues, and I value the work they do in the field, as I know I'm just like them, providing the best care when time is critical. I know this, Mr. Chairman, because I know the Department of Health has ensured that they are well trained, practicing the best evidence-based care, and when mistakes are made, that these are remediated, just in the same manner that they know that I am, because our Department of Health has the authority to assure this of me, with EMS, with nurses, with our water quality, our barbers, and every public health measure. This is why, Mr. Chairman, we strongly oppose this bill before us, House Bill 6282. But let's not get lost in what this bill does. I think you heard testimony before that from people who said this bill does not change anything. This bill clearly removes the Department of Health's authority to regulate EMS. Specifically, it gives the Ambulance Advisory Board veto power over DOH regulations. This is unprecedented and dangerous. Mr. Chairman, while I have great respect for the individual members of the Ambulance Service Community Advisory Board and do not doubt their intentions on providing excellent EMS care, and the dynamics and political influence of this board is concerning. Our chapter of emergency doctors has a single seat on this board. And to answer the question earlier that was asked, that this board is not entirely for this legislation. In fact, there's written testimony probably in front of you from members of this board that oppose this legislation. So it is not unanimously supported by members of the board. So at a meeting in March this board is predominantly composed of special interest groups and political appointees. And the few physicians on this board are particularly undervoiced when it comes to issues of evidence-based practices. In fact, at a meeting of March of this year, 13 of the 20 members that were present at that meeting were either past or present members of a fire union. 2 years ago, legislation was passed that further consolidates the power of this board. At that point, the Department of Health was kicked off the board, and 2 new appointees, political appointees, were assigned, one of whom you heard from earlier. Mr. Chairman, you heard testimony from proponents that claim this bill would not change what the current practices are and that the DOH would have the final say. This is not what the bill says. In fact, it says the exact opposite. As Representative Potter noted, this bill uses the phrase subject to approval of the board 8 times. And as for the fiscal note section, I think this does need more consideration. However, I must comment about the role of a medical director within an EMS agency. And medical director is a physician who works alongside within an EMS agency to go over protocols, policies, review cases, and go over quality control issues on an individual case-by-case basis. This is not an easy job, nor is it a job that can be done well as a volunteer basis. Mayor Policina has a volunteer medical director for Johnston EMS. And I can tell you, I don't know if he has legal consultation or accounting consultation that's volunteerism. But to assume that medical direction should be a volunteer basis on the goodwill of doctors is the same thing to assume that a lawyer should provide free legal fees or free legal consultation to a municipality. Mr. Chairman, medical direction is an important and serious job that is taken very seriously by members of our society. And while we really feel that a strong medical director is an integral role, as evidenced by testimony in the Senate hearing on the same bill by Chief Partington of Narragansett, a medical director is an integral and important part of every EMS division. But anyways, to summarize, Mr. Chairman, I think this bill would be very dangerous and unprecedented, and as it is clearly written, would remove the authority of the Department of Health when it comes to EMS care. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman and members of the House.
Thank you, Otis, for your testimony. I appreciate that. Are there any questions for Dr. Warren, please? Representative Potter, go right ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Warren, for your testimony. I wonder if you can just briefly elaborate and expand on one thing that you mentioned that I didn't completely hear clearly, where you were talking about the makeup of the board and said that there was only one seat dedicated to somebody from your area of expertise. Can you elaborate on that, and can you just expand broadly, briefly, on the entirety of the makeup of the board?
Sure. I think the entirety of the makeup of the board is actually explicitly outlined in the bill itself. So you can look at that specifically. Our college, which is the American College, or the Rhode Island chapter of the American College of Emergency Physicians, has one nomination to that board. The Rhode Island Medical Society has a nomination, and I believe the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American College of Trauma Surgeons has a nomination to that board. Now, we as a College of Emergency Physicians only have one seat on that board. And as I mentioned earlier, 2 years ago, this board was changed in its composition when the Department of Health was kicked off this board and 2 more political appointees were placed in lieu of that. But I think the exact composition of the board, I don't want to misquote, but it's in front of you within the bill itself.
Correct. If the committee is interested, it is right on the first page, beginning on line 6. You can actually read the makeup of the current board and the number of people from each discipline that the board is comprised of.
But if I may, Chairman, while the special interest groups have more representation than we do by statute, the practicality of this is that the majority of this board were either past or present members of a fire union by the nature of the makeup and the political appointees. So the physician voices of this board are frequently drowned out by the majority voice, which is, while not explicit in statute, in practicality is made up by these special interest groups.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions for Dr. Warren? One from Representative Giraldo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's not really a question. I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Warren for calling out, I feel like, a lot of important pieces, specifically that, in his words, that this legislation would give the board veto authority over the Director of Health. And as I'm looking over the letter of opposition provided by Dr. Alexander Scott, they believe, as the legislation pretty much says clearly, that would be the case. And I thank him for highlighting that and the other points that he presented. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative Giraldo. Are there any further questions for Dr. Warren? Okay, Dr. Warren, thank you for your testimony. I hope to get to see you soon.
Yeah, you too.
Okay.
You too, Mr. Chairman. Take care.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our next witness. Yes. Hello, Chief. Chief Partington, this is Chairman Casey from the Health and Human Services Committee. How are you this evening?
I'm good, Chairman Casey. Thank you.
Good, sir. You're here before us on House Bill 6282. If you would go ahead with your testimony. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Casey. Thank you for hearing my testimony. Good evening to all of you in the committee as well. First of all, I'm Fire Chief Scott Partington. I'm the Fire Chief in the town of Narragansett. Have been for the past 7.5 years. I've been a member here for 30-plus years for the department. I currently represent the Rhode Island Association of Fire Chiefs as their current president. I also serve as a current member of the Ambulance Service Advisory Board and have since 2017 representing the Rhode Island Fire Chiefs. I'm a licensed EMT cardiac, 30-plus years of that, as well as a registered nurse in the state of Rhode Island. And I previously served as our department's EMS coordinator as I came up through the ranks. So I have some experience in the EMS field and some of the changes that have occurred over the years. First of all, let me just say, I know there's some tension regarding this bill, but the Rhode Island Fire Chiefs in no way desire to sacrifice any competence nor any nationally recognized professional standards when it comes to delivering our EMS pre-hospital care services to our community. Contrary, we're always trying to improve and deliver the best services possible. We're just trying to ensure that we remain a part of the discussions when it comes to implementing these new regulations, fees, protocol changes, delivery models, and technologies that may come out, especially those that are going to inevitably impact us financially here at the local level. We're seeking some foresight for that. The fire chiefs and EMS administrators just need to be made aware of how their budgets will ultimately be impacted by this. Again, we're not trying to decrease any or sacrifice any of the competence or standards. We just need to be made aware of how these changes are going to impact us so that we may be able to prepare for them. And how they may be intended to be implemented or even rolled out would be very helpful in the planning process. As a member of the Ambulance Service Advisory Board, we've heard how the makeup of the board is. It's a wide range of professionals and representation. There are at least 4 physicians, I believe, that serve on the board. There's also a certified emergency nurse that serves on the board, as well as some very, very professional oriented and experienced people. Previously on the board, we've had quite a few discussions regarding changes that have come up. And we've been debating them and had discussions in committee. And we just believe that needs to still remain constant. I think this bill looks to do that, looks to reassure that. We're trying to avoid some of those unilateral sweeping changes that may occur to the protocols and regulations and more or less sidestep some of that debate and discussion or planning aspect. I understand in instances of state of emergency, COVID-19, when it breaks out, it's a very dynamic and fluid situation. Those types of things change virtually daily. The guidance that was coming out on the changes that were occurring were daily. The EMS leadership under the direction of the director and the Center for EMS, they had their hands full in trying to make some quick changes when it came to the guidance on those things. And we understand that. We understand that those situations occur. That's not what we're gearing towards so much as it is the wider sweeping changes that occur to our regulations and protocols overall. I just want to add a few more things. Previously the rules and regulations of EMS that had come out, that had been promulgated in the past, they were the result of some of these discussions and debates that we had, and particularly at the committee level. And I recall one of those discussions revolved around the role of an agency's or an organization's EMS medical director, and we've had that debate. And we went back and forth, and it was excellent discussion on it. And both sides weighed in on the benefits of it. I believe, yes, I agree. The fire chiefs also agree that EMS medical directors need to have an active role. They need to be a participating factor when it comes to delivering services within each other's community. But that should be an agreement that occurs. The extent of it, the criteria involved, the payment that's involved, how it's outlined. That should come upon the particular agency or fire department themselves to work out those agreements. But yes, EMS medical directors do need to have that continued involvement to be able to help with professional development and basically overseeing some of their quality insurance, quality improvement aspects within their agencies. So we're not debating that aspect. We're just saying that relationship needs to happen between the agencies. But yes, EMS medical directors serve a vital role. And that's just an example of some of those discussions that we vetted out at the Ambulance Advisory role. So I just want to also put in another plug for the fire service. There is some representation on the board from the fire service, but keep in mind, the fire service remains the primary delivery agent of pre-hospital care services in this state. And we'd like to keep it that way because we believe it's a significant benefit to our communities. And it was a perfect example of that during this recent pandemic and the state of emergency that we encountered here. We're an important, valuable resource. A fire-based EMS medical service delivery model is extremely useful and works quite well in its model. And this is not only the position of the Rhode Island Fire Chiefs, but it's also been the position of the International Association of Fire Chiefs nationwide since 1975 when they first issued an opinion paper on this. So we have the ability to utilize our first responders in so many cross-trained aspects, technical areas where inevitably EMS delivery will occur, EMS care will have to take place. So we're a very vital resource. We want to be better. We want to make ourselves better. We're not out to, let's say, dummy down any of these standards or regulations that would inhibit that. We're all for about better care, quality care to our communities. So we're committed to those professional standards and providing the best, highest level of pre-hospital care that we can. So those are my comments. Thank you for your time. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to take any.
Thank you, Chief Partington. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative Kassar first, and then we'll go to Representative Speakman.
Thank you, Chief, for your testimony and your perspectives. Just a curiosity, if you can help explain, it sounds like you've been involved with the board long enough that you've been through the changes of the kind of the removal of the Rhode Island Department of Health's representation on this board and the involvement, and this seems like yet a further step away from the Department of Health's engagement. The mission of the Center for EMS with the Department of Health is, that's the final backstop of emergency medical services in our state. So can you give me a little insight and help me understand why there has been sort of this gradual removal of the Department of Health's role with the board? How has that served the goals, and is that something that you see going in the right direction? Just any insight would be helpful.
I think I defer. Might defer to the chairman of the board to kind of give you more of a historical background on how that transpired. I believe there was some legislation around that, which essentially removed the Rhode Department of Health's representation on the board. I'm not entirely sure as to the reasons why. I believe if the way the bill is written, if the last final say is given to the Rhode Department of Health director to be able to make those decisions, then it might have been felt that why do we need the Rhode Department of Health as represented on that board when they're going to be represented because they ultimately have the final say as it goes along. I would say they did while they were on the board. I'll be quite honest. They did bring some insight and some debate as well at the committee level, but they're still free to attend the ambulance service advisory boards. They're still free to attend any of the committees that are still ongoing. So there's still active participation from them. It's just they're not a current represented as a current voting member on the board itself.
Thank you, Chief. I believe we do have the president of your board who's going to testify later, so we can defer those other questions to him as well. Are there any questions from the committee for Chief Partington? First, Representative Speakman, and then we'll go to Representative Morgan.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chief. Thank you for your service. And this may be a question better answered by the director. When you say, and another witness said, that the director of the Department of Health gets the last final say, that is not how I read the legislation. And so if someone can help clarify where that is, I would appreciate being directed to it. And then, as I believe it was Representative Potter pointed out, the term subject to the approval of the board is there a lot. So many decisions that the director now makes would be subject to the approval of the board. And I wonder, and again, maybe the director of the board is more appropriate for this, how many times the board meets? Is it quarterly?
Yes, that's correct. The board meets at minimum quarterly. We do at times have special meetings if the chairman calls for a special meeting. We're able to have those special meetings. And committee meetings are called according to the committee chairs.
So based on your understanding of how this legislation would work, would you anticipate more regular, frequent meetings of the board given its new responsibilities under this legislation?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to defer to the chairman of our board right now, our president of the board, on that and how that would work with this bill. And then this bill. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
We're going to go to Representative Morgan. I believe she has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I don't understand what's broken now. What is this legislation trying to fix? You have the Board of Health on there now. They give their input as you're developing different changes. You're saying they're going to have the final say at the end of it. So what's broken now that is making this change necessary? Why are you doing it?
Is that a question directed to me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Oh, okay. As far as what's broken, I believe it's just what this bill is essentially looking for is reassurance that it doesn't get broken. In the sense that the discussion and the debate that goes on at the Ambulance Service Advisory Board, along with understanding the full impact of the changes, upon the EMS agencies, upon the fire departments, which essentially make up a large number of the EMS delivery service to our communities, how all of that is going to impact us. We're not there to necessarily argue the science behind it. We're there to try and understand it and understand what the impact would be upon our EMS agencies and communities to be able to plan for it and prepare for it. I think this is just I think this legislation, and I'll let those who have helped write it and introduce it speak on it on its behalf. But I believe what it's essentially trying to do is ensure that process remains in place going forward, judging upon some of the things that have happened in the past.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any, I'm sorry, Representative Morgan, go ahead. I don't know if he answered your question, but I think there will be other...
We'll wait, I'll ask it again.
Okay. Yeah, there are going to be more, there's quite a bit of testimony that will come, so I'm sure we're going to get to it. Chief, are there any questions for the Chief? Representative Potter has one question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chief, and thank you for your service. Just quickly, in your capacity, in your role, I assume that you probably interact and communicate with other similar positions in other states. Is that correct?
Yes, to some degree. To some degree, when we meet through New England associations and things, we have discussions. Yes.
Okay. To the best of your knowledge, is this kind of oversight framework in place in any other state?
That I can't say for sure. I'm not too sure on that, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions for Chief Partington? Okay. Thank you, sir, for your testimony. We're going to move right along to the next witness. Dr. McTaggart, this is Chairman Casey from the Health and Human Services Committee. Are you with us?
Yes, I am. How are you?
I'm doing fine, sir. You're here before us on House Bill 6282. If you would go ahead with your testimony, please.
Okay, thank you so much. By way of introduction, my name is Ryan McTaggart. I'm I'm Director of Interventional Neuroradiology over at Rhode Island Hospital, and I'm against this bill. I'm also the chair of the Rhode Island Stroke Task Force, and I want to start the conversation by saying that I have immense respect for our firefighters in this state, and their ability to provide EMS services, and it's really through partnership with them that I have accomplished what I consider the greatest thing in my career, and that is improving stroke care for all of Rhode Islanders. I came here from the Cleveland Clinic in 2015 and with the goal of trying to improve access to good stroke care in the state. One of the procedures I do, which is basically a procedure to directly remove blood clots blocking blood vessels in the brain, was new in 2015, and Rhode Island did about 14 a year. Now, in 2020 and 2021, we do about 250 to 300. And that's 250 to 300 people that basically go home instead of needlessly dying. And to sort of complete the thought, the only reason that happens is because I came here partnered with firefighters and EMS professionals, and we basically worked together to get patients to the right place the first time. But the reason that happened is because we gained consensus with an updated EMS protocol through DOH and legislation at the State House, and the DOH and the Rhode Island Stroke Task Force worked to get this legislation in place, and then helped do the education so our firefighters would know which patients to take to the only level 1 stroke center in the state. So, it's important to recognize that, that thrombectomy procedure, that surgery to remove that blood clot, that was a new procedure that had as big an impact in clinical medicine as organ transplantation or coronary artery bypass. And it happened in 2015, and we were immediately able to change protocols to get patients in Rhode Island immediate access to this new therapy, and the numbers are staggering in how many people we've actually helped. And because of that, we've saved a lot of downstream healthcare costs. Instead of people going to these long-term rehab facilities, they can go home and live independent lives, and in many cases go back to work. So that's sort of a testament to how important it is to be nimble, for EMS professionals to be nimble and to be able to assimilate or change their practice immediately and very quickly. And that happened in this case because of the leadership of the DOH, Dr. Alexander Scott and Chief Rhodes, and the dedication of the Rhode Island Stroke Task Force. Again, I want to emphasize how much I respect our firefighters who, it's amazing that they can provide these EMS services. But on the other hand, I've also attended some of the ambulance service advisory board meetings, and I've seen how they can be a little contentious at times. I've seen how some of the decisions and some of the policies are more based on opinion rather than data. I can recall one conversation about, intubations in the field, and some pretty compelling data was presented that some patients were being harmed, but there was a lot of posturing, and I would say almost bullying, because, people were resistant to changing practice even when presented with pretty compelling data. So I think it's extremely important that for the benefit of all Rhode Islanders, that we sort of have a system of checks and balances. No party's entirely independent. We do have to make all of these decisions for the care of patients in Rhode Island with data and with all the new technology that's coming down the pike. And I'll tell you, pre-hospital medicine is sort of the final frontier. It hasn't gotten a lot of attention because hospitals make money by caring for people that require heroic procedures. But we can really save the state a lot of money if we engage in better pre-hospital care, we keep people healthy at home, we use new telemedicine technology, and all of this needs to come through the Department of Health. So that we get patients, or we change our system, our care delivery system to save money and help Rhode Islanders. So I think that we need to be very suspect of this bill. I think stroke is a great example of what can happen for people in the state, not only for patients, but how the state can save money by being nimble and changing practice with data. And finally, another important aspect of having the DOH involved and having oversight is because we're never going to know what happens to patients, and we're never going to know if we're getting what we pay for if we don't have clarity and granularity on who saw the patient, where they took the patient, what happened to the patient. And unless DOH is managing that data and can basically regulate, what emergency care reporting forms are used and require that they be filled out, we're never going to be able to get to that data. And that's really what we need to bend the cost care curve for healthcare. So I hope I haven't gone on too long. I have tremendous respect for what you're doing. I can't emphasize how important pre-hospital medicine is. We're just scratching the surface of what we can accomplish. If you appreciate the work that went into changing stroke care, for all of Rhode Islanders, there's so much more we can do. But this bill is way off course, and I just do not think it's patient focused. It's about agendas, and we need a bill. A bill needs to become before you about EMS that's laser focused on patients, how we implement new technology. And that's those are the bills that you should be receiving, not something like this.
Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate your testimony. Are there any questions for Dr. McTaggart from the committee? Okay, there are none. We're going to move on to our next witness. Thank you for your testimony, Doc.
Neil?
Hello, Neil Heitinen, please.
Hi, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine. You are here before us on the House Bill 6282. We are anxious to hear what the Department of Health has to say. If you would please go ahead with your testimony.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. I'll try to be brief, and thank you for allowing us to testify tonight. I first want to thank all the members of the Ambulance Service Advisory Board for their service prior and throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, including Chief Partington, Mayor Policina, and all the dedicated officials on that board. We at Rhode value the expertise and input the board provides us from a variety of different perspectives throughout the state in the field of pre-hospital care. So I want to be very clear, our opposition to the bill is not because we do not value that feedback, but we are very concerned, as we outlined in the director's letter, that this bill would hinder the director's ability to regulate licensed entities effectively and ensure that she can most effectively carry out her statutory duties to protect public health and ensure EMS decisions and protocols are evidence-based and data-driven. I want to assure the committee that we do make every effort to seek the board's input prior to writing and proposing regulations. We've done this most recently in March, and I want to be clear that even though we do seek advanced input from the board on regulatory changes, it's not the only time the public and various stakeholders have to suggest changes. There's still the typical regulatory process we go through as a department that takes a period of several weeks prior to enacting regulations, in which there's opportunity for public comment, both written and verbal. The department must issue cost-benefit analysis if there's a significant fiscal impact, and we must respond to comments and concerns with a concise explanatory statement in which we defend our reasoning for promulgating these important public health regulations. This was the case last time we issued non-emergency regulations in the EMS arena in 2018. There was some mention of that regulatory process by Brian Daniels of the League. That was as a result of our APA regulatory review process, and then, as stated before, there was lots of back and forth with the board over various amendments we were looking to make, and the board did vote in favor of supporting that regulatory overhaul, which was then put out for public comment, and later amended during that regulatory review process. So I wanted to provide that example tonight because I think it highlights the fact that the board's current structure and the current regulatory process are serving the public well. So we don't see the need to make such dramatic changes as are being proposed, but if there are certain amendments to the statute that the board and committee would like to make, we would like to discuss them with the full board. And I think some of the concerns or desire to have a fiscal note earlier on in the process before the board looks at proposed regulations, I think we'd be happy to do that. As I said, it does happen through the normal regulatory process, but I think that's something that we would be happy with. But overall, wanted to express our concern for removing the director's oversight. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony, Neil.